The steam engine was first developed in Britain back in the late 18th century. Since private companies were behind them, each company, even though companies adopted different track gauges. Track gauge is the distance measured between two running rails. This model governs from scale models you see in museums or at the Wegmans grocery stores, all the way up to high-speed rail requirements. I've been using OpenRailway, a website that shows all current, former, and planned mainline, metro, and tram tracks in most of the world. I spend most of my time in the US, Spain, and more recently France, as I've pitches for regional Lyon, Nice, Caen, and probably Marseille by the time this video comes out. The story goes that the late ultimate light water valley in the UK was built by the British Railways, which probably means OpenRailway is a good plan to add roller coasters to the site, although I find it as unnecessary work. However, I usually came upon numbers on a quick Google search for r/roller coasters and coaster buzz. From r/roller coasters, I found out that most B&Ms have a track gauge of 137 centimeters, which is 1,070 millimeters, with roughly 4 foot 6 inches, or Scotch gauge, which equals 1,072 millimeters, which can still be found in Japan and is not in Central Scotland anymore. Also found that Valraven's gauge is 1,980 millimeters, which would be 6 foot gauge, 1,829 millimeters, or Brunel gauge, which is over 2,000 millimeters. Aerovicom at Chance Morgan and the Gerstlauer Infinity are around 1,200 millimeters, is 4 foot gauge, or 1,219 millimeters. This is used today on the Glasgow subway. Gerstlauer Eurofighters, on the other hand, are only 800 millimeter gauge, which is roughly 2 foot 6 or 762 millimeter gauge. This was used on Journey Through Nature's Wonderland at Disneyland and seems to still be common use in North Korea. Currently, we'll shed some light on one coaster track gauge, which tends to be 42 to 44 inches, or about 1,077 millimeters to about 1,120 millimeters, which is really 3 foot 6 or 1,067 millimeters, known as Cape gauge, although I would type meter or 4 foot gauge as well. This is still used by Japan's conventional railway network as well as LA's former streetcar network. Without further ado, let's see how bad OpenRailway is at judging roller coaster track gauge. So in OpenRailway, you have options to see based on infrastructure, like if it's a main line, branch line, the res high-speed rail, brown spur tracks. Take all the yellow, that's branch lines. Blue, that's all the metro lines. So you have Paco here, Frankfurt line here. It's lighter blue, that's underground. That's Paco. That's Broadridge Spur. This is the Broadridge main line. Then a portion of the Market Frankfurt line. There you couldn't really tell in the center city part. 101, 102. Those are showing as tram, and the North Sound line is showing up as light rail because really numbers don't really exist anymore. You have the Brown Lake Industrial line, industrial service track as well. There's some crossovers, sidings, yards. If you zoom in close enough, you can see track numbers. Clearly see that down in Orlando, just north of the land to the split right there. Yep, just north of the land station at Florida Route 44 is where Rail Corps, which is owned by Sunrail. It goes by the land siting in the Sanford subdivision, which I believe is CSX. But since we're down in Orlando, let's see what the Orlando parks have to offer. So you can, actually the water slides show up actually as tram lines, at least the liftals for this raft. So that's just a belt. Doesn't make much sense at all. You can see also max speeds. There's information for the coasters, which makes sense, but dash line is only speed in one direction. You can see these are like 79, which feels like a standard for local trains, like conventional routing. So it's like darker is slower and brighter is faster. So like if we were to go over to like China, we would see purple tracks, and most of Europe would be like a reddish orange color. So like we went over to Madrid and see their high speed line out there. See signaling, electrification. So this is not electrified because they use diesel train to go back up to Philadelphia. We'd be able to tell what that is. But we're focusing here on track gauge right here at the bottom. So we can kind of like with the distance is that it's darker colors are narrower gauge and the brighter colors are broader gauges. So using our information, we don't have information for Intamin, so we don't know how accurate Velocicoaster and Hagrid's are. But if we still had the Dueling Dragons, we would easily be to tell that. And I believe Hippogriff here is Vekoma. Noting that all three of these, two of these are from the same manufacturer. Hippogriff is not. Simply showing up, I think just as narrow gauge, which means they're under a meter. But like I can definitely see that with the older like style which is used for the hydraulic launch coasters. Those look fairly narrow, but they can still hold 2 people per side. Like these are still 2 people per side. But I would think Hagrid would have a slightly larger gauge because of the sidecar. But it doesn't look that much different than more recent coasters like a Pantheon and now a Titanius in France. Also just feel a bit more like narrow, but I think you use the same track as I-305. It's interesting to compare that. So it looks like, but now Hulk isn't shown on here, and that's a B&M. And then we have the Seuss right here, which makes no sense. This is seriously a train ride, and it's considered a monorail on here. So it's a monorail and not a coaster. Mummy's in a box, but Hollywood Rockets is a Mauer, and that's not showing up. I think yours doesn't exist yet, but we do have some of the naming on here. Like, do a rough idea. Like, they're just all names, like kind of what we know they are, but we don't have the ride names. Even there are rumors, but Grantillas Hotel. With that information. Disney World, the monorail shows up. This is just a normal train, but the darker blue is 1,016 meters. That's roughly meter gauge. The Mineral Disney World Railroad is only 914, 3-foot gauge. And does say that Field Mover is standard gauge. Because it's made in the 70s, as well as the loop for Main Street right there. It's going to Tampa, so we know quite a few B&Ms, and didn't like see what was popping up. So let's ship up to Sister Park out in Williamsburg. Again, only the rail line comes up. Let's go back up to Allentown to Dorney Park. The train ride on Thunder Canyon shows up as narrow gauge. Zephyr, I believe this is Zephyr right here, which says 610. Snoopy's Junction, the later like a teal color, and then the Rockets are shown as a monorail. Let's see if the Coney Cyclone shows up. Yeah, Dino's right there. Coney Cyclone doesn't show up. I remember seeing Wallaby Roan Alps showing up. But you can see here that all the gold is Iberian gauge, and the black, that's all the high-speed rail line that's active to Orense, and there is standard. I think there is like higher, at least high-speed or higher speed rail going on in the Galician Y. Since we're here, let's go zoom in on Madrid, and you can see here the entire metro is in the Italian broad gauge. Parque de Atracciones, but it is just the 2 train rides. I guess both are monorails, but this one has like a physical train thing on the front, and that is narrow gauge. And the blimp ride, that shows up only as a monorail. Leon. Oh, huge blimp of color over here. Mystic only shows up as standard gauge. When, according to our notes, it is a Garcelle Infinity, which means it should be 4-foot gauge. So it's like a 600-ish gauge. 600 millimeter. Same with Mystic, and it even shows the transfer track. standard gauge and the mouse as narrow gauge, I think would make sense for a while, since those trains are very compact. But like we said, Vekoma should also be in that 4-foot gauge, and that shows up as narrow gauge for the Boomerang. We'll see another kiddie train ride showing up in the teal color, and then obviously monorail being showing as a monorail, and then the horse ride actually was narrow gauge, and is Tivoli also narrow gauge. That is a very flat track, and trains are fairly narrow, so you can get away with that. Got to its sister park, Park Asterix, which is referenced in Mystic's Q. You know, Disneyland Railroad here, and it does actually show Crush's Coaster in the box, so that's not a limit, and not quite sure what's going on right there, though. Something like that makes sense. Spinning coasters, I guess, yeah, kind of like the mouse, is that small cars. And then both of those are like Mach. Like older Mach, that would make sense. And then also looks like partially standard gauge and partially narrow gauge for Big Thunder. That makes no sense. And also, again, the track there is standard gauge for this one. Indy is narrow gauge. An Intamin that's based on Finfari, which is very weird. And I think it's a completely different track type than Intamin uses than normal. I think that's Pinfari. Yeah, those. You can see why it's showing up as narrow gauge. There's a little blip for Park Asterix, and all the rides are narrow gauge. And then, except for the train itself, I guess. So we know that narrow gauge, that should be in the Cape gauge or meter gauge or 4-foot gauge. Goodric's, again, that should be 4-foot gauge. Just Leaks. It's a flat, kind of flat ride. I think it's fine being narrow gauge, since most others are same parallel anyway. With the Kare, again, Sierra. That's okay. 6 stars. I can see that's a Mach family coaster. I thought Fireside had a bit more room than the Tivoli, but not by much. Little train ride right there. Tatis. And again, we don't know, but that I definitely don't feel that should be showing up as narrow gauge. I don't know. That might be just a normal car ride, I believe. And that's Chanel 7. Thing is a kid's coaster. That's fine. Osiris. That's a B&M. So that should also be that should be Scotch, a good example with this. Park Asterix to look at. Okay, a whole mess of golden teal. It's all the golden teal. So yeah, there is like there is the whole monorail system. There's like 2 or 3 there. It's actually is miniature scale, which is like that makes no sense at all. Okay, Panorama, that is actually a miniature scale train, so that is okay. The Atlantica Super Splash, that has to be one of the widest track gauge of all roller coasters. That has to be. Voted again, that's 4-foot gauge, and then I guess whatever Intamin has for like Top Dollar Dragon stuff, I could see it being fairly similar with like the Blue Fire clones. Bit wider, probably. Yeah, this, we know this should be showing up as Scotch gauge. I don't know, it's 1600 millimeter. And no idea what's going on over there. Oh, this updated. But shows only the train as narrow gauge and Kukulin as narrow gauge. Hey, I zoomed all the way back over here to Toronto, and okay, you can see the darker red streetcar fittingly. And it's not that far away that we get over to, but it only shows the treetop ride over the kids area, and then a sketch of the water slides across the lake. Train 914 and Suez Junction as a miniature railroad. But you do see all the ferry lines, so this actually is a good resource for that. Now, let's call this off at Disneyland. Yep, Disneyland Railroad is 914, as well as the Main Street vehicles. You have the monorail. Casey Jr. is 610. The rail and the monorail just share the same hub. Actually doesn't make sense, just to save on space. The monorail goes around the front there. But it does show standard gauge for the Carthay Circle Metro line for the Red Line cars, which haven't actually run in a while since the whole Marvel thing was done. So it'll split down Hollywood Boulevard and does only go around 2/3 of the circle. You can't, but like the credit cards are. You do see the launch being represented by a little row of fountains, but this picture fountain, I guess you do get like a bird's eye view. And it's interesting that they should be able to hear 914, all the rest show up as standard gauge. Oh, knots. Wow, knots is actually really small. And again, another Snoopy train. I think that's another Snoopy train. Calico Mine Ride. It shows the outdoor sections of Calico, and that's 610. Oh, that's probably where Ghost Riders of that weird, like, enclave. But yeah, just a little interesting video today. Kind of running ideas. Seeing the code show up on OpenRailway is like, that's funny enough for a video. So yeah, until next time, call, subscribe, strike the bell. Cool things are coming.